Imagine, for a moment, a single phone call so powerful it could shake the very foundation of global diplomacy. A conversation with the potential to redraw borders, recalibrate alliances, and upend the fragile balance of world power. Picture this. On the 4th of July, not on a stage of fireworks and patriotic parades, but in a private, highly confidential exchange. Former United States President Donald Trump posed a question to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy that left diplomats and policymakers around the world stunned. "Volodymyr, can you strike Moscow? Can you strike St. Petersburg too?" This was not just idle banter. It was a watershed moment in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, a signal that the world's tectonic plates were shifting. For many, it was a sign that the rules of engagement for the United States, and by extension the global order, were being rewritten in real time. Just months earlier, Trump's campaign was promising the American people an end to what he called forever wars. He promised to focus on domestic priorities, dismantle unnecessary overseas commitments, and stop entangling the United States in foreign conflicts. The phrase "America First" echoed across rallies and interviews. Yet here, in this unprecedented phone call, he was reportedly urging Ukraine to strike deep into the heart of Russia, specifically Moscow and St. Petersburg, if Washington provided the necessary weaponry. President Zelensky's reply was as stark as it was bold. "Absolutely, we can, if you give us weapons." How did the world reach this extraordinary moment? To answer that, let's retrace the tangled roots of this conflict, a saga of ambition, resistance, and the relentless currents of history. The seeds of today's crisis were sown over a decade ago. In the chilling winter of 2014, Russia, under President Vladimir Putin's leadership, annexed the Crimean Peninsula in a move that defied international law and was condemned by much of the world. It marked the beginning of a new era of confrontation between Moscow and Kyiv, a confrontation that has shaped not only the fate of these two nations, but also the security architecture of Europe and the world. But the conflict did not remain contained. Over the years, the war simmered and erupted. From the trenches and ruined villages of Donbass to the tense debates in the halls of the United Nations, the situation escalated dramatically in February of 2022. Russian troops crossed the Ukrainian border, launching a full-scale invasion in what became the largest land conflict in Europe since the Second World War. Thousands of civilians were displaced within days. Major cities like Mariupol, Kharkiv, and Kyiv came under attack. The world watched in horror as the conflict unfolded live across social media and rolling news. Within days, what had been a regional war became global. Western nations, led by the United States, responded with unprecedented speed, providing Ukraine with billions of dollars in financial aid, advanced weaponry, real-time intelligence, and humanitarian support. Yet, they walked a careful line, providing Kyiv with the means to resist, but always wary of crossing Moscow's red lines and risking catastrophic escalation. American presidents, from Barack Obama to Joe Biden, have wrestled with this dilemma, struggling to balance the moral imperative to support Ukraine's sovereignty with the existential risk of direct confrontation with a nuclear-armed Russia. Donald Trump, during his first term, was famous for his skepticism toward America's overseas entanglements. He repeatedly criticized what he called endless wars, demanded more burden sharing from NATO allies, and insisted that the United States should not serve as the world's policeman. On the campaign trail, he argued that only he could end the bloodshed in Ukraine, promising a swift peace deal and a return to stability. Yet the events of this past July reveal a radical rethinking of that doctrine. According to exclusive reporting from the Financial Times, Trump not only reconsidered his stance, but actively explored the idea of providing Ukraine with long-range missiles capable of striking at the very heart of Russia. His stated objective? To make the Russians feel pain, to shatter the illusion of Kremlin invulnerability, and to force President Putin to the negotiating table. The reaction to this new strategy has been seismic. In Kyiv, Oleksandr Mereshko, a prominent member of Ukraine's parliament, described the prospect as very encouraging, especially as Ukraine grapples with relentless missile and drone attacks from Russia. As Ukrainian air defenses are stretched to their limits, the hope is clear. U.S.-supplied long-range weapons could tilt the balance, disrupt Russian supply lines, and neutralize the threat posed by Moscow's growing arsenal. But in Moscow, the reaction has been a mixture of contempt and calculation. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov dismissed the reports as theatrical, accusing Washington of fueling the flames of war rather than seeking peace. Senior Russian officials have declared these threats as nothing new, just another round in an ongoing information war. Political scientist Ruslan Bortnik warns that Trump's tough rhetoric is unlikely to alter Putin's calculus. The Russian leadership, he argues, is prepared for a long war and will intensify its campaign if it feels cornered. On the ground, meanwhile, the stakes are rising. In early July, Russia launched what Ukrainian officials described as a massive drone barrage. Over 24 unmanned aerial vehicles targeting cities across Ukraine. Power grids flickered, civilian infrastructure was hit, and the psychological toll on the population deepened. In the aftermath, Trump reportedly threatened to impose sweeping tariffs on any nation that continued to trade with Moscow if a ceasefire was not reached within 50 days. Was this a shrewd negotiating tactic, a threat to pressure Russia's trading partners, or a sign that the United States might escalate its involvement? Behind these headlines, anxieties are growing on both sides. Reports from inside Russia suggest that some citizens, especially in the major urban centers of Moscow and St. Petersburg, are increasingly uneasy about the prospect of U.S.-supplied missiles threatening their homes. While the Kremlin projects confidence, the specter of the conflict spreading into Russian territory is causing unease. Meanwhile, experts like Sergei Poletayev of the VAT4 analytical platform caution that today's alliances can be fickle. Today's ally may become tomorrow's scapegoat, he notes. Should negotiations falter, Trump's frustration with Russia could pivot toward Ukraine, leaving Kyiv exposed and isolated. Let's pause here and consider the critical question. If the United States crosses this previously unthinkable line, supplying Ukraine with missiles capable of striking the Russian capital, what might come next? Will it force Putin's hand and bring Moscow to the negotiating table? Or will it trigger a cycle of escalation with unpredictable, potentially catastrophic, consequences? Let's explore the possible futures that might unfold from this dramatic shift in strategy. Imagine, for the first time since the Cold War, Russian cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg facing the very real risk of attack, not just as an abstract threat, but as a daily security concern. The psychological impact on the Russian public and the elite would be enormous. For decades, the Kremlin has cultivated an aura of impregnability, projecting its power outward while keeping the homeland secure. That illusion would be shattered instantly. Some Western analysts believe that such a shock could push the Kremlin toward genuine negotiations, seeking a face-saving exit from an increasingly costly and grinding conflict. But danger lurks on the other side of this equation. Many security experts warn that striking the Russian heartland could provoke massive retaliation. History is full of examples where leaders, feeling threatened at home, double down rather than back down. Political scientist Ruslan Bortnik argues that Putin and his inner circle are not easily intimidated by Western threats. Russia's military doctrine explicitly reserves the right to escalate in response to attacks on its territory. The Kremlin might respond by unleashing devastating barrages on Ukrainian cities, targeting critical infrastructure, and potentially broadening the conflict to include other countries perceived as supporting Kyiv. Some even fear the possibility of Russia turning to cyber warfare or unconventional weapons in retaliation. Consider for a moment the lessons of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. This crisis, the closest the world ever came to nuclear war, was the result of a standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union over the placement of nuclear missiles in Cuba. Both sides understood the risks of escalation, and ultimately, diplomacy prevailed. The world learned a sobering lesson. When great powers feel threatened in their own backyard, the potential for catastrophic miscalculation grows exponentially. Could the current standoff over Ukraine echo those dangerous days? Could a single misstep, a misunderstood signal, or a rogue actor trigger a chain reaction leading to disaster? The possibility of deeper American involvement is another perilous avenue. If Ukrainian strikes on Russian soil provoke overwhelming retaliation, Washington might feel compelled to step up military aid even further. This could include providing state-of-the-art air defense systems, advanced cyber capabilities, or an even greater supply of intelligence and logistical support. The United States could also tighten economic sanctions, expand tariffs, and move to sever Russia from the global financial system entirely. Each of these moves carries enormous risks, not only for the immediate participants, but for the entire world economy. Energy prices could skyrocket, supply chains could be thrown into chaos, and inflationary pressures could ripple across every continent. Let's not forget the lessons of recent history. The global economy is more interconnected than ever before. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Oil and gas prices soared. European countries scrambled to find alternative suppliers, and industries from agriculture to semiconductors felt the shockwaves. The price of wheat jumped, food insecurity spread in vulnerable regions, and investors watched nervously as markets wobbled. Today, with the possibility of new tariffs, supply chain disruptions, and even tighter sanctions, the stakes for businesses and consumers alike could not be higher. On the flip side, there are voices urging caution. Critics of Trump's approach argue that this may be high-stakes grandstanding, a way to pressure both sides without a genuine intent to escalate. If the United States changes course after the next election, perhaps shifting to a more diplomatic, conciliatory approach, the conflict could freeze in place, leaving Ukraine vulnerable to territorial concessions and a protracted stalemate. This frozen conflict scenario is fraught with peril. Millions of Ukrainians would be left in limbo, living under the constant threat of renewed violence, while Russia could consolidate its gains and prepare for future provocations. For the global business community, these developments signal deepening risks. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has already upended global energy markets. According to the International Energy Agency, European reliance on Russian natural gas fell by more than one-half between 2021 and 2023. Countries like Germany and Poland raced to secure alternative supplies, building new liquefied natural gas terminals and signing long-term contracts with producers in the Middle East and Africa. Meanwhile, the disruption extended to commodities like nickel, palladium, and even fertilizers, sparking price spikes and shortages. The global semiconductor industry, already reeling from supply shocks, faced further uncertainty as key raw materials became harder to source. Investors are watching with bated breath. The introduction of new tariffs on countries trading with Russia could have cascading effects, from higher input costs to shifting investment flows. Financial markets are notoriously sensitive to geopolitical risk. For example, following major escalations in the Ukraine conflict, the MSCI World Index, a benchmark for global equities, has seen sharp swings, sometimes losing hundreds of billions of dollars in value within days. And as history shows, risk aversion can drive capital away from emerging markets, further destabilizing vulnerable economies. For ordinary citizens, the message is equally urgent. In an era of information warfare, deepfake videos, and relentless propaganda, it has never been more vital to seek out credible news sources and to think critically about the narratives being presented. As Ukrainian Member of Parliament Oleksandr Merezhko put it, "Hope is useful, but air defense is vital." The ability to separate fact from fiction, to anticipate rapid shifts in the world order, is not just the duty of policymakers. It is a skill every global citizen must cultivate. So what can you do as a viewer and participant in the global economy to prepare for the fallout of these historic events? First, stay informed. Follow developments from multiple reputable sources, international news agencies, expert analyses, and direct statements from officials. If you are an investor or business leader, consider the second and third order effects of geopolitical risk. Energy price shocks, supply chain disruptions, and regulatory changes can happen almost overnight, affecting everything from manufacturing costs to consumer prices. For travelers, be mindful of shifting visa requirements, new security protocols, and travel advisories that may emerge as alliances and tensions evolve. And for everyone, cybersecurity must be a top priority. It is well documented that cyber attacks and phishing scams spike during periods of international tension. In recent years, both Russia and Ukraine have been targeted by sophisticated cyber operations, and spillover effects have hit companies and individuals worldwide. Protect your data, use strong passwords, enable two-factor authentication, and remain vigilant against suspicious emails or messages. In today's world, information is power, and so is security. Let's return to the heart of our story. Does Trump's bold new strategy bring the world closer to peace, or to a much larger, more devastating conflict? The answer, as so often in history, is deeply ambiguous. By pushing Ukraine to strike deeper into Russia, the United States is taking a monumental gamble. If it pays off, the shock to the Kremlin could open the door to real negotiations, a ceasefire, and perhaps the architecture of a new security order in Europe. But if it fails, the world could find itself sliding into an even more perilous confrontation between nuclear-armed powers. The next several weeks and months will be critical. Watch for unexpected maneuvers from both Washington and Moscow. Will other countries, such as China, Turkey, or key members of the European Union, step into the breach to mediate? Or will they be drawn further into the fray? History is being written in real time, and every diplomatic gesture, every military movement, Every new economic sanction could tip the balance. There are subtle yet telling details that illustrate the symbolic warfare now underway. Recently, the city of Moscow renamed the official address of the United States Embassy in honor of pro-Russian separatists fighting in Ukraine. On the surface, it might seem like a petty act of bureaucratic defiance, a snub aimed at Washington. But in international politics, such gestures carry weight. Street names become statements. Symbols become signals. They remind us that beneath the headlines, a contest over identity, legitimacy, and national pride is raging as fiercely as any battle on the front lines. As we close, it is worth reflecting on the broader lessons of this moment. The Russia-Ukraine war is far more than a regional dispute. It is a crucible for the emerging world order. It is testing the principles of sovereignty, the limits of great power competition, and the resilience of global institutions. It is forcing countries to revisit old alliances, reconsider their energy security, and confront uncomfortable questions about the cost and limitations of military power. The decisions made in the coming days and weeks by politicians in Washington, Moscow, Kyiv, Brussels, and beyond will shape not only the fate of Ukraine, but the trajectory of global politics for an entire generation. Will we see a return to diplomacy and a renewed commitment to a rules-based order? Or will we witness a descent into chaos, with ever-widening circles of conflict and retribution? If you found this deep dive analysis valuable, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest updates on global economics and technology. Leave a comment below. Do you believe this escalation will lead to peace, disaster, or something in between? We will be tracking every twist and turn, bringing you expert insights and real-time updates. Stay tuned, stay informed, and remember,